This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Alexandra Beller. You're an author, artist, and yeah, you're a choreographer and director and educator as well. So you got a lot of hats, but want to welcome you to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Thank you so much. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing really good. We've been interviewing people since 2016. We're at this episode 1218. So that's where we're trying to hit 1300 this year, but we're on our way. But thank you again for being on the show. How you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good.
So one of the things we have to ask everybody before we get to the heart of your interview is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Start with the small questions, right?
Yeah.
I have always been a very deeply feeling person. Like I experience the world with a lot of sensation and feeling. And I think in all of my different capacities, you mentioned a lot of hats. I think underneath all that hats is someone who really believes in living from sensation and feeling. That doesn't mean I discount analysis or science or structure, but to find the most authenticity and truthfulness in my life, I feel like being in a feeling state is important, and knowing how to go in there is important. And I think underneath all my hats is someone who tries to support other people to do that, to find their feeling, to find their truthfulness and their authenticity and their embodiment so that they can live as authentically and fully as possible.
So is your book, The Anatomy of Art, kind of going in that direction, or is that just a part of what you do?
I mean, both. It's going in that direction. So this book, I do a lot of creative mentorship for artists. So artists who are struggling with their own process, feeling lost or stuck, or having insecurity, doubt, imposter syndrome, inner critic. I mentor artists to try to help them make the art that they really are trying to make, not the art that I want them to make or that I like, but what they're trying to say to help them get out of their own way to find their voice. And so I do think that as part of that, they need to really understand themselves and really understand how they feel, and not just follow a trend or do what they think an audience will like. And of course, I think that is a microcosm for how we relate to one another. I'm not going to try to tell you what you want to hear or please you or appease you. I'm going to try to be as authentic as possible while also considering you, thinking about you, having empathy for you, recognizing where we're different and how things might hit you differently. But I think the book is, yes, trying to do that. And it's also only a part of what I'm doing.
Well, I think it's really interesting because I try to make it my mission on the podcast to talk to creative people like all types, like all over the world, and find out like how do people create, why do they create, and this idea. Like I'm a big fan of the Victorians and the idea let them use, and things coming kind of from the universe. And I've been more of a modal jazz type of guy that goes into like in the moment, not being perfect, like happy accidents,
Yes.
and understand like left brain, right brain, like Da Vinci, like the
Absolutely.
idea that you can have a little bit of science, a little bit of art, a combination of everything.
Yes.
And that's where I kind of come from. Liberal arts major. I went to Bowdoin College back in the 90s, well, 80s, late 80s. But this idea that you can synthesize everything. You take a little philosophy, take sociology, take art history, take like some computer side, but like whatever. You take as many things to try to learn what you don't know, right?
Absolutely. And I do talk about that in the book quite a bit. The way I frame it in the book is that we need both instinct, which I also would say instinct, intuition, embodiment, sensing, feeling. And then we also need analysis, science, rigor, research, structure,
Yeah.
architecture, scaffolding. And we need both of those things in art and, of course, in life. But I don't think they play well at the same time. So what I talk to artists about is be in one state and really be in it. So if we're in that sensing, feeling, intuiting state, um, when my inner critic starts coming in and talking to me, well, where's this going? How is this going to connect? What is this after? Is the audience going to like it? That does not help me feel more, intuit more, sense more. It doesn't help me
Right.
be
Oh, you
witchy
lose
and
it. Like,
daydream.
Yeah, you lose the groove. It's like I'm a musician, right? So like when you're in the groove, like when you're in that kind of you're in a trance, kind of like if you're in a jazz group and you're in the middle of that song, and you're in that groove, and it's like not very nonverbal. Like in dancers and artists, and a lot of people who are in the creative space can understand that. Like when you're on stage in that moment,
Yeah.
in the scene, in the song,
Yeah.
in the dance, like that's like you're in it. Like you could be
Yeah.
in a trance and people go back and show you the film. And say, well, I don't know how I got there. I got 10,000 hours of doing this, and I got there because I'm
Yeah.
in it.
And then on the flip side of that, we can't live in only that and make great art. We need to use rigor. And so, when artists are like, "I don't know, I just felt it. I don't know why." And I'm saying, "Right, but I want you to tell me why. What is that piece of music doing for this at this moment? Why do you want it? Why is it important?" "I don't know, I just like it." Okay, but I want you to be able to defend it also. Like,
Yeah,
I wanna talk
yeah,
about why, and if you can't, there's maybe not as much rigor to it as there could be, and let's think about what some of your other options are. Maybe you use that piece of music because it's a habit or it's what people expect or, a lot of other reasons that actually limit your choice making. So what I talk about around this is that we need to toggle back and forth between instinct and analysis, but not try to use them at the same time. And just the way the inner critic interrupts our intuition, I think sentimentality and attachment and fear can interrupt our rigor. So, when we're trying to like be analytical and, as we say in the arts, kill our babies, which just means cutting things that you loved, but actually aren't necessary, that duet in that I love it and we spent a lot of time making it and it's so beautiful, but it's not adding to the story. It's redundant. Let's cut it. It's
mhm.
painful. It's painful to do. And we can't use that intuitive sensing feeling state to make those hard choices. We sometimes need to say, okay, analytically, I'm going to say this show is 2 hours long. It's too long. What are we going to cut? That's redundant, even if we love it. And that's the moment at which we can't let that intuitive side be talking to us. We need to use some kind of
Yeah,
present.
there's a balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a balance. It's like anybody, like you're any musician, you have a 7 minute, 8 minute song, you cut it down to 3 minutes. So there's a bunch of stuff you cut out.
And it's
It's a
painful.
bunch of Yeah, it's painful because like there's stuff you could. Yeah, I mean every jazz, unless you're like Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock, and they put together something and it was in the moment. Like there's sometimes you can capture something in the moment and third take. You could do 10 takes, but the third take, you go back, you listen, and that's actually the one. So you're
Yeah.
still doing the editing.
Yeah.
You're still because you went and did 10 takes and you decided to take 3. That's not
Yeah,
that you didn't edit. You made a choice.
absolutely. And I think that's really important in art making as well, that we do both that divergent thinking, which I hear you talking about, like could be this, could also be this, could also be this. Great. Keep bringing them on the table. And just because I picked my very first one doesn't mean that those other 9 takes were not useful. They absolutely were. They led me right back to I've tried everything I wanted to try. I went in all kinds of directions. This is really it. And now I know it. I have proof, and that feels scientific.
Yeah, it's like left, right brain. Like every time, like I'm a synthesis, which means I play synthesizer to do sound design. And so I spend a lot of time just trying to get a sound right. So I'll create a sound before I even turn it into a song.
Mhm.
But I'll spend hours trying to get to a sound just to get a certain sound that I
Mhm.
want to use. That's like a newfound sound. It's like it's
Mhm.
not something that's already exists. I created from scratch. And so that in itself is like an idea like sound painting.
Mhm.
That you create the sound before you use the sound. And
Yeah.
sound designers, that's kind of what we do. And it's a way of like painting, with the auditory painting. But
Yeah.
in itself is like I could spend 2 3 hours just trying to get a sound and say, well, what would you waste time? It's like it's not a waste of time because it got me to a certain point and I had to say make a decision, and then I used it in the song, and then there's a
Yeah.
whole nother process. And it's like there's a lot of aspects to it, but like you put the 10,000 hours of rigor to learn your instrument or to learn your process, to learn your craft, and then you make judgments. And
Mhm.
then you go back, you make editorial judgments. You might have other people come in, like beta readers for an author,
Mhm. Yeah.
editors for like, in a filmmaker or other types of
Mhm.
just feedback loops.
Right. And the thing that I think is so beautiful about those outside sources, like an editor, a dramaturg, people like that, is that you do get to outsource a little bit of that brain split because somebody else is going to come in and take over a little bit of that role of like, well, do those two things want to be next to each other? Do you need more transition? Are you being redundant? That's the analytical brain, and of course we can manifest that ourselves, but it is fairly luxurious for an artist when they get to stay a little bit more in that sensing feeling state, and somebody else can come in and be that
Yeah,
rigorous
like, you
critic.
sometimes you're too close to it.
Yeah.
You'd see, like, a guy like George Martin working with the Beatles. He would find things that the boys didn't see
Hmm.
or didn't hear, and that's
Yeah.
what a great producer does. It's like they say, "Hey, what happens if we change the key? What
Yeah.
happens if we take this part and move it to this part? What if we change the timing?" And it's not like we destroyed the idea, but we're adjusting it and making it better. You know,
Yeah.
you're going through different lenses and say, "Hey, like, what happened? You put it through this lens, or you put it through that lens," and they figure out is it true to what you wanted to do.
And bringing more choice into the room, right?
Yeah,
Bringing more options, and without that kind of attachment, that outside person can bring in choices that, yeah, wouldn't have occurred to us because we and habit gets a bad rap. There's nothing wrong with habit. We need habits. And of course, they also start to limit our choices. And so to be able to have somebody come in and say, right, but what about, and that is what my book is trying to do.
what
I'm
about
not teaching anybody how to choreograph or direct. That's up to them. I'm just saying, great, but in terms of time, what about, or have you thought about, or what if, and trying to be a little bit of that analytical brain and also a friend, a loving analytical brain, because you don't want the dramaturg or editor to come in and be like your inner critic. You want them to come in and be a loving, supportive, kind source of rigor for you.
yeah, you
And
don't want it to feel like a red mark, right?
yeah,
Like, I
exactly.
think the great, people who assist, people in the arts or people who are creative are the people who don't make the person feel like very low. If you make people feel like you're helping them get that piece to the world, you're helping them bring it out rather than you're being super critical and just saying, "Oh, you didn't get it right."
Yeah, and you're always on the side of the art. And if you're on the side of the art, you're on the same side as the artist.
Yeah.
But I'm not there. I don't think of myself in some ways I don't think of myself as being the mentor to the artist. I think of myself as being a friend to the piece of art that artist is
Oh,
trying
so you're
to.
helping it like, you're helping it become
I'm
the
helping the piece of art become what I believe it's trying to be. Of course, I'm gonna ask a lot of questions of that artist because they know better than anyone what that piece of art wants to be. But sometimes the artist has blind spots, and they're doing some things out of fear or doubt or projection or habit that I can say, it looks like potentially this piece of art wants to shake off this habit. What do you think? Should we
yeah.
try it?
But sometimes you're going to, like outside the bell curve, you're going to, like, the limit. Like, a lot of times they get, like, I always bring it to music, but like Hendrix, like, when he showed up with feedback, the engineers were like, "That's not supposed to go on the record." And he had to fight to keep it on the record because it wasn't a sound that the engineers said should go on the record. So the canon in engineering is that that's not correct.
Right.
Well, sometimes the thing that's not correct is exactly what you need to do.
Exactly, and music history, dance history, art history, literature, they're all full of examples of this, where somebody at a certain point, and you can point to, 100 different famous artists, you say like, "Well, James Baldwin wasn't, that wasn't what the way people were writing at that moment." And
Yeah.
he was like, "But that's what I'm writing, and it's gonna change history. It's gonna change literature, and it's gonna change culture." And you can look at, Picasso or, any of the artists that
Orson
yeah,
Welles,
that
like, with,
started.
like, Citizen Kane, with,
Yeah,
like, the idea of, some of the cinematic things that he did, when they asked him, he said, "Well, I didn't know you couldn't do that."
yeah,
And it's like it becomes like the gold standard. Like a lot of the cinematic details and certain things. Like I think there was a thing where the camera kind of would they had these things that would slide into other pictures. Nobody had ever seen that, and he kind of invented it. And
Yeah.
it was like this transition that had never been done,
Yeah.
and he didn't see, well, why can't you do that? So like
Yeah.
he created something that no one ever saw before. And the people who do that, a lot of times people will say they hate it because they
Oh,
never
yeah, of
seen it
course.
before. So you kind of have to fight for it. If it's never been seen before, people is like, well, I don't know if that's going to work. It's like,
Oh, if there's not a significant number of people hating what you're making, you're not doing anything new, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's the thing is like, what's the level of like hate toward your work
That
or
you can
discomfort
withstand.
with your work, and what is like actually like, well, it's not actually credible, or it's not at the level where you could be, right? It's like, are
Yeah.
you actually underperforming, or are you doing something that just people don't understand because
Yeah.
they've never seen it before?
Yeah, another metric that comes up with this is there's a famous theater director, and she's writes beautiful books about theater. Her name is Anne Bogart, and one of the things she says in her book, A Director Prepares, is, and I'm paraphrasing, but if your work, your art, does not at some point embarrass you, you're not you're not doing anything new. At some point in your process, you should feel embarrassed, and she doesn't mean like ashamed or humiliated. She really means like, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I putting out there? People are going to see this. And if you don't at some point in your process feel something like that,
A little
then you're,
discomfort. Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
think like Bowie said that you had to tread water a little bit to grow artistically. He never felt like if he felt like he was being Ziggy too long, he shifted to be Thin White Duke or be Aladdin Sane. He could go into a whole nother character because he's like, I got too comfortable with Ziggy, so I had to change it up.
right.
A lot of people would just stay Ziggy the whole career,
Of course, it's
and
working.
that would work. But it's
Yeah.
like that's a loop. It's like you get bored with that loop.
Yeah. And truthfully, eventually people want to knock you off your pedestal when you build it with too much structure and you're just sitting on top of it comfortable. Eventually someone wants to knock you off of it. The artists that are constantly pushing themselves, growing and changing and trying on new things and failing publicly, I think are in a lot of ways the artists that people stay the most loyal to and trust.
Yeah, like Dylan when he went electric, or Dylan when he went from like being a folker to being electric, or going outside of like the folk. There was a couple transitions, like when he went electric at the folk festival in the U.S., and then when he electric in London.
Yeah.
And people were yelling at him like Judas. They actually the folkies were saying Judas, and he one thing he said that I have on tape is like, "I don't believe you," and he kept on going with the electric version of the songs. And I thought that was, to me as a musician, I was like, wow, he actually stayed in that auditorium and kept on going when people were booing and saying Judas and saying all this stuff, and he kept on doing it.
Yeah.
And I just, to me, it's like that's like, that I always like look up to people who go that direction.
Yeah. Some real artistic bravery. And John Cage, had similar episodes when he was trying to break. And in dance history, the entire movement in the 60s into the 70s called the Judson Church movement, which was the postmodernism of modern dance. And they were, doing all kinds of, let's face it, what seemed weird stuff. And some of it was not interesting. But what
Mm.
they were trying to do was break the model, break the mold, and
We got
break the oppression and the
the can,
authoritarianism.
yeah,
Yeah,
can you have like a canon for any like classical musicians? They get stuck in the tradition of the structure.
yeah,
And then eventually some of them break away and they go off into another genre
yeah,
because they learn the baseline and then they say, well, I have to go beyond this because it's stifling to just be within the canon. Sometimes you want to break out of it.
yeah. And it's really challenging to break out of people's expectations of you. This is true for being a human as well as being an artist. And, I think it's really scary. Most recent example, Beyonce and her country album and how much, shade she got for it. And, whether it's good or bad is not really the point. What I would love to see is people just celebrating other people taking risks and going outside of their comfort zone.
More
Um,
interesting. It's more
yeah.
interesting if you actually I like to see people who have a progression.
Mhm.
You know, you see the Beatles were like the ultimate teeny bopper boy band.
Right.
Love Me Do help, like, and
Yeah.
then you see Abbey Road.
Right.
By the time you get to Abbey Road, I mean, they're like a progressive band like Yes before Yes,
Yeah.
right? They're doing something that other bands ended up emulating.
Yeah.
You know, with all the progressive rock bands were impressed by Sergeant Pepper's and, Abbey Road and the White Album because, like, look where you could go.
Yeah,
You
and look how much you can, yeah, stretch, elasticize yourself, and change while being popular and in the public eye. It was pretty brave.
Yeah, that always to me is the bravery of that kind of experimentation, to use the studio as a canvas, and as I George Martin kinda gave me the idea of, like, sound painting. He talked about it in relation to the Beatles. Could he say, it's like Monet. Like we could do it like in Germany. We could record like we can play, which is a four-piece band, and that's all we can do. That's physically what we can do. But if we go in the studio, we can do more than that. And so that's where you get Sergeant Pepper's is the idea that you could actually layer sound like a painting.
Mhm.
That was very appealing to me, like the idea that you can use the studio as a
Mhm.
canvas
Yeah,
and to layer sound like the way painters layer paint.
cool. Yeah, beautiful.
And I think that's when anybody starts to realize, like, you're not constrained by what you physically can play.
Right.
You can actually compose beyond what you could actually do in real time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, like, one of the things I was reading about, like, there's and I don't know these systems, but the Laban
Hop on.
system and the Bartlett systems, and your approach is, deeply personal and poetic. Like, can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, so Laban was an Austro-Hungarian choreographer and philosopher, really, in the like surrounding World War II. Died in the 50s, I think. Um, and Bartenieff was one of his students who then developed a lot of her own work. So Laban wanted to create a system of notation for movement similar to music notation. So,
Oh,
a composer can write a symphony or song, write it down on a piece of paper, go and get hit by a horse and carriage, and right
still exists in the world.
that that symphony lives forever, right? You make a dance and you can kind of maybe sort of hope that the dancers will remember it and teach it to somebody else eventually. This was before video. But there was really no way to
Cool.
capture a legacy of dance, right? It was only in people's memories, and dance in itself so ephemeral, just disappears. So he wanted to create a system of notation for movement that was like music notation, but in order to come up with this, the notes already exist. So, but in order to analyze the human body, he had to break it down into like, okay, what is the body doing? Where is it doing it? How is it doing it? And even why do I think it's doing that? So he has these four categories: body, effort, shape, and space, through which he analyzed all of human movement and created a notation system for it. The notation system to me is not, for me, the interesting part. For many people, it is, and good for them.
Mhm.
What I'm interested in is the actual analysis, because we can then apply that to meaning. So his system then became a lot of what we know as nonverbal communication
Oh,
field.
wow.
So, even what like the CIA does today to interrogate and, watch people's body
Or
language, he's
detectives,
lying.
like, yeah, watch people's body language to
Yeah.
kind of figure out what they're doing.
It also became a lot of the field of child psychology. So a lot of his students then took his work into a lot of different
Other fields, so it
fields.
kind of went out like a web.
Yeah, exactly. And Bartenieff was one of them. She was a physical therapist. She moved to New York during World War II. Her husband was Jewish and they were escaping from Germany. And she was a physical therapist and she worked predominantly with kids who were recovering from polio.
Mhm.
And so her big contribution was she was talking about really authentic, organic biomechanics. So, how the instrument of the body works. And And then when that instrument gets less functional or traumatized or, off kilter, how might we repattern it to get it back to its most efficient health? But for me, her work deeply transcends the physical and goes into the emotional, the spiritual, the
Metaphysical,
political, even.
like metaphysical kind of aspects of it.
Yeah, because when we're talking about how can I be the most myself and the most, healthy self I can be, of course, we're not just talking about joints and muscles and bones. We're talking about our reason for living, the way we interact with, other people. Her one book that she wrote is called Coping with the Environment, and it's basically about, like, finding yourself and then learning yourself well enough that when you relate to people, you're as clean as you can be. And then Laban's work is also about observing other people and trying as much as possible to like own the bias that comes into the filter of how we see other people
Mhm.
and starting to ascertain meaning from watching the human body move. But one of the most important parts of that is that I must recognize I'm a human being with my own filters and stereotypes and trauma and biases. And so I can't just look at somebody and say, "Oh, this is what you mean." No, it's a collaborative process. I'm looking at how a person's moving, I'm getting some information. I might feed that information back to them, see how they're feeling. That will give me more information. So it's a
Two-way street.
dialogue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's going back and forth. It's like microcosm, macrocosm, inner,
exactly.
outer, and
Symbiotic. Inner outer
symbiotic.
is literally one of the 4 themes in Laban-Bartenieff movement analysis. Inner outer, stability, mobility, function, expression, and exertion, recuperation. And that's what we call the 4 themes. But inner outer, you just named one, you
Yeah,
know.
I'm big time into like that and the looking glass self, another Victorian thing. Like
Mhm.
as a songwriter,
Mhm.
I kinda dive into, like, Blakey and, Blake and Wordsworth and Keats and a lot of Lord Byron, but this idea of looking glass self or oh, sorry about that.
Sorry. No, no, my fault.
And, yeah, it's like a lot of that inner outer stuff,
Sorry, that
but,
was my computer.
it's the computer doing that. Yeah, well,
Oh,
sometimes
where'd it go? Oh, where
you
are
good?
you?
You lost me? I still see you. Oh, I guess you lost the screen. It might have jumped in. You might have to jump in, jump back out.
Are you there?
I'm still there. You might have to come in, come back out. I don't know if your window got like, your alert. Oh, there you
Okay.
are.
There,
Your
sorry, apologies.
yeah, alert kinda you took over. I
Yeah.
wanna put do not disturb on, but yeah, I think the idea, like, the looking glass self, the inner outer eye, the microcosm, macrocosm, but I always been, like, drawn into some of these concepts in terms of, like I think as an artist, what you do is you channel, right? And you channel what's inside and what's outside, and you synthesize it. And that's kinda like the nature of really good artists is they're able to have balance, the inner and the outer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is that kinda what your experience that's what you feel like you've dealt with in dance, that's part of the same thing, like a songwriter or a poet maybe thinks in those terms, but dancers think in those terms too?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of dance is about an inner outer experience. Of course, that's what we're doing when we dance, which is, taking this inner world and making it visible to the outer world.
Yeah. So you're expressing a nonverbal aspect. That's what I like about instrumental music versus like, I like lyrics, not write lyrics, but instrumental music kind of goes into this idea of like it's nonverbal. Right, and you can do things with the sounds that evoke, like, pictures in your mind that people see these scenes of melancholy or exuberance or whatever that you by the way you do the movement in the sound,
Yeah.
and I would think that dancers will do try to equate their body to do that movement that I'm trying to do with strings or pianos or bass, whatever instrument I'm trying to get you to feel the same way.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
What's the synergy like with the music and dance, and how much work is done to, like, sync that sound to the movement?
Well, I think different people, different things. I certainly have worked with a ton of choreographers who are deeply attached to I only choreograph with music. I have to have music. I can't choreograph without it. Whenever anyone's that attached to something, I generally try to take it away for a period of time. Um, I am somebody that I love music, but it's very powerful and it can overwhelm my system in terms of what is it that I want to say and what is it that the music's saying. And I can tend to fall into more like decorating or illustrating the music rather than staying true to
Saying the
myself.
story. Oh,
So
wow.
for
Yeah, 'cause
myself as a choreographer, I don't put music in until later in the game, partly because I don't want to be beholden to the music, and also because I believe dance should be doing 100% of dance's job and music should be doing 100% of music's job, and we shouldn't try to do each other's job. And so if I feel like I need music to be able to really feel like this dance is great, I haven't done enough work on that
you need to
dance.
work on the dance. So
I
so
want
you wanna look in isolation, like you isolate like a music will isolate a track.
for a
Like we'll
while, yeah, for a
we'll
while.
isolate our music, we'll isolate the drums or isolate,
Yeah, and then say
and just, then see if we get that right before we
yeah,
bring the next thing in.
exactly, and say, "What is this doing? Is it doing its job?" And, to your example, like, if I feel like, "Well, we just need more drive from something, the drums aren't giving us that drive," well, maybe we need to look at the drums a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And, maybe that electric guitar can be doing something else, and if I'm not getting enough drive from the drums, then maybe I need to talk to the drums instead of adding something in to kind of cover
Mhm.
that up. I'm just
It's like a
reminded
pure
that
dance, but that's a pure like, that's an interesting point of view that you want the movement to tell the story without being distracted by other things. And I
exactly.
would think in dance, you can have lighting, you can have set design, you could have all these extra things outside the dance, but you wanna focus on, yeah, find the set design guys, the lighting, what they wanna do, what they wanna do, but I wanna get the dance down
Yeah,
with
and I
what
wanna
I'm trying to
integrate
say.
and collaborate with all those things, like, the dance is gonna do something in relation to the projection, in relation to the lighting, with the costumes, with the text, etcetera. I want it all to be symbiotic, and I want it to be a really meaningful ecosystem, and I don't wanna need the music to convey what I wanna convey through the dance. I My hope is that you would get it in silence and that
Mhm.
the music then amplifies, excites, or contradicts, right? So if the dance is doing 100% of its work, I actually could use music to contradict that dance. Like I could be doing this like painful emotional dance and then put on some very, you
Yeah,
know,
you have a dual
charming,
layer, yeah, but there's multiple layers of meaning because
a
sometimes
little
you'll
like
have some yeah, you
yeah,
can do that in film where you could have, like, a happy song with a really, really weird, dark image,
yeah, and if
and so
I'm like,
it's
"No, I need
dichotomy.
a dark song to feel my dark dance," well, then my dance is not doing the work it needs to do, right? My dance should be complete, and then the music gives me another relationship and something to respond to, and maybe it's even sadder because there's this happy music playing, right?
Yeah, we have the dichotomy of duality, I like having the duality of, like, maybe multiple things happening at once, and then people have to kind of find the Easter eggs,
Yeah.
and so, like, you might wanna have to go see the show a couple times to actually get what's going on.
Well, that's my favorite kind of show. And then but then as a that's me as a choreographer, as a mentor of choreographers, but as a dancer, of course, like the music is so I remember performing on stage. I was a dancer with the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company, and I had the extreme honor of performing live with Max Roach.
Mm,
And I just remember this moment on stage, and Max is just like tearing it up.
yeah,
And
he tends
I
to do
was
that.
doing a solo in the middle of the stage and just like felt like I am the vessel for this music. Like it was so, and of course, that music was complete. You didn't need me.
Mhm.
But I felt like it was more like a trance or a, you know, uh, like a
Zone. You kinda get in the
possession.
zone.
It felt like a possession, really.
Yeah,
I
well,
felt
that's what happens, you
like
kinda get in a trance.
yeah.
Like, I've been in situations with bands, like, they're really hitting it, and you can't even describe it. You're just getting this movement. It's very nonverbal. We kind of all know we just nod at each other. We kind of know where to go.
Yeah.
And it can sometimes you get these magical moments and you can't recreate. You can get close to it. Not the as a musician, you go back and listen to what you did, and he's oh yeah, we're gonna turn that into a song. But you never always hit exactly what that moment was. That
Yeah.
moment is its own thing. You can get close to it, but usually you can't get it 100%. You get like 99% of what it is, but that's why that moment is. That's why we want to record it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because sometimes you can't get to it. So is that always like the rub? Like you're trying to recreate something, but sometimes it's like gonna be its own
Yeah. Well,
experience. I mean, I guess
what
you have to recreate it as a dancer. You have to make sure you do that as within the limits of what you're trying to show, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 sides of it. For one, there's, one thing that I think I hear you talking about is just the magic, utter magic that improvisation can offer, that no amount of forethought and thinking and planning can make the type of magical moments that happen when you just have these accidents or inspirations or, collisions that happen. And so then to recreate that and try to get the juicy magic out of it is its own task. And then for a performer who's performing a known quantity, so not improvising, but performing set material, and are meant to do it in some ways the same way every time so that other people can depend on them. And you need to step on a certain count. You need to be in that light that the lighting designer worked hard to make. You need to be there to catch the person who's throwing their body at you. I need to be doing the same thing. And yet what we really want is for it to feel like we are inventing it in the moment, even though I happen to be taking the same step with the same foot on the same count, same part of the stage. But I'm like, I could do this. Right. And from the inside, I think we want that feeling of improvisation, even with really set material.
Yeah, you still have a certain level of improvisation. Like even like when you see a band playing your favorite song and you go to see them, it is not note for note what's on the original.
Yeah.
It's
And you
very
wouldn't want it
close.
to be,
You
right?
yeah, it's super close and you recognize it. But there is that leeway that we have
Yeah.
as artists to kinda stay within the structure, but have fun with it
Yeah.
and kinda make it its own moment so we don't get bored.
Yeah, and even when it might look like that is exactly what you do every time, like, there are certainly dance pieces where exactitude and unison is so important, and you can't do any of that playfulness that's visible to the audience, and yet even then, on the inside of the performer, my hope is that they're like, "I'm just inventing this right now," and, I looked because I had a flash that something might happen. Yeah, you look every night because that's the choreography, except from the inside of that person, the hope is that that feels fresh and it feels like a new idea.
Yeah. But how you do it with the micro timing of it is a little bit different no matter how exact you are.
Yeah,
So it
totally.
still is its own thing
Totally.
at that level. So then you're still satisfying that you just have to, feel it. And
Yeah.
so that's really interesting about rigor. And like I always talk about like the 10,000 hours it takes to do anything.
Mhm.
It's kind of the idea of the rigor
Yeah.
that you have to, understand music theory before you can break it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to probably understand dance theory before you can invent like a new dance. You have to
Yeah.
understand what works. So like once you get to that zone, like in terms of the artistic endeavor to have this creative space that is using like your body and your mind and your spirit and kind of using everything, like all the pillars and not focusing on one, right? Maybe
Yeah.
being able to be more, I don't know, holistic.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And like your very first question, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I'm saying my hope is that I can invite people into themselves in ways that they have not been able to offer themselves that permission or invitation or um, you know, being unapologetic about who they are in the world. And I think that that feeds right into what you're saying.
Well, I think there's a lot of joy in the creative process. Though, songwriters, we kind of live sometimes in, we take our agony
Yeah.
and our melancholy and we turn it into a piece of work. And I would think
Yeah.
artists, dance probably take the same. You have to pull the inner and pull the outer, and you're pulling from really deep
Yeah.
emotional places. To convey what you're doing, you gotta make it's gotta come from something that's gonna make you feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always feel that it's a very cathartic thing to take emotions and then turn them into art, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's in itself, that's the joy, and, that's why, like, therapists use art therapy
Yeah,
because
and the beauty of one of the beauties of dance as an artistic medium and perhaps why I picked it, even though I am a writer and I do sing, but dance for me, bypasses so much of the frontal lobe material that we have used to construct the world and storytell. And there's something about this um, pre-verbal sensing experience that, like, our desires, our fears, our curiosities and excitements, I think, do come through the body in a way that is so unfiltered. And then, of course, we can filter it and we can structure it
yeah,
and
and
you know
turn it
turn
into
it
a
into
great
all kinds of things. But watching somebody move in an unapologetic, uninhibited way gives them information about themselves that they were not able to come up with even in the most, profound therapy session, or their journal or their conversation with their spouse. Because there are truths that I believe the body is holding that we don't know. We can't
Mhm.
verbalize, we can't write them. They are animal truths that if we open the channel between our body and the world and we let go of embarrassment, there are things that the body can tell even us, much less other people, that we're not privy to.
Well, it's kinda like an ancient thing, 'cause, like, dance is like human communication probably
The first,
before words. It's like the
it always
dancing in indigenous peoples, I'm part Cherokee and Blackfoot, and it's like the dances have a lot of meaning in indigenous Native American culture, in terms of the oral histories behind, how you can explain it through the oral histories is not exactly what you actually see, you know?
absolutely.
So it's
And
like the translation always isn't what you put in words and what you visually see, the movement is like there's a lot of distance between it.
yeah, exactly. And, you're talking about, like, this cultural lineage of dance 100%. And then even in, like, our individual experience of movement, of course, movement is our first language. When we're like, our parents are looking at us as a baby and they're trying to figure out what we need, we're telling them physically. We're not using words, of course.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's the communication that a lot of artists, musicians, we get the nonverbal cues all the time.
Mhm.
And we can just like look at somebody, we don't say anything, right?
Yeah.
We can just kind of know. You give
Yeah.
us a look with your eyes. Like
Yeah.
actors do this with their eyes.
Mhm.
Like how many scenes with great actors, there's no talking at all. It's like what they're doing with their eyes,
Yeah.
what they're doing with their hands.
Yeah.
So I think dancers and actors there's a synergy there with understanding what you can do with your body in slight movements. The
Yeah.
actors ever kind of play with like the eyes more, maybe not doing as big grand movements that a dancer does, but there are some things they're doing with their body that aren't
Absolutely.
as direct.
And I work with a lot of actors, so this is definitely part of my wheelhouse that I love to live in, and I do consider all of that a dance.
Mhm,
And I also think that one of the things that's in the way of that, and you see y younger, greener actors, with a certain kind of self-consciousness and, "Oh, I'm gonna be sad," overacting. And
mhm,
part of that to me is because this authenticity that I started off talking about today, um, if we're not living and feeling, and I don't mean in our art, but just in our life of like, oh, that hurt. And I'm noticing what my body did and where I feel it in my body, or like, oh, I'm scared and I'm, oh, look at what my body's doing when I'm scared. And the greatest actors, I think, live like that because when you want to be able to put on a posture, a gesture that's communicating emotion, you have to be able to find it.
Yeah, you have to find it, kinda like a method acting that you have to kinda keep that in your life. The great method actors is like how are they able to channel these things? Well, because you have to kind of become the character and stay in it and feel that character to be that person.
And then
And
what I love about the Laban Bartenieff work with actors is that, yes, and that's how method acting started, but then method acting itself, in a lot of ways, promotes a kind of abusive,
yeah, maybe
mentality. Like,
wrong-minded.
yeah,
Going
yeah,
you have to hurt yourself to do it.
yeah, you have to go into your own trauma. What the Laban Bartenieff allows us to do is say like, "Oh, well, when I'm scared, I do this, and when I'm sad, I tend to do this." And so, like, then I don't need a director to say to an actor, "Okay, think of a time when you were really, really scared, terrified. Think about that. Go into that feeling." No,
You have to go
we don't
back
want
and
that.
recall it rather
No,
than
we
be
don't
able
want that. What I
yeah,
might say is like, "Okay, I want you to squeeze your shoulder blades together. I want you to lift your shoulders up and, like, squeeze your arms towards your ribs, and then kinda try to look natural, but keep that, feeling going inside. So all that muscular tension you just came up with, I'm not breathing so well now. So my voice is going to be a little bit different. And I'm trying to just look relaxed. But actually, on the inside, I have a lot of tension and it's affecting my voice and it's going to affect my posture. And then the audience is going to be able to
they're
feel
gonna feel
that
all
in
that
your body.
tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, they feel that you create it's not a special effect. The greatest actors is like they're their own special effect.
Yeah, and then
If
they don't need to go into some storytelling or trauma from their past and dredge up some painful, PTSD moment. They can just put their body in a posture, do things with their energy dynamics, their gaze, their focus, their proximity, and you can make all these discrete little body choices that now we've cataloged of like, well, when the body does this, often we read it this way. And it
mm,
doesn't mean everybody doing a certain thing means exactly one thing. It's not a dictionary, right? So
yeah,
people will say like, "Oh, if your arms are crossed, it means you're closed off." No, maybe, but also maybe you're cold, or maybe you have a shoulder injury you're protecting, or maybe you realized you have a stain on your shirt and you don't want somebody to see it, right? There are 100 reasons why you might cross your arms. So there's no one-to-one body meaning,
mm,
but there is a lot of consistency and like, well, if you see somebody with a certain kind of posture, you're going to tend to associate it with certain things. You might
yeah,
be right, you might be wrong, but what we're looking at in Laban is not so much like, oh, I nailed it, that person's sad, but well, that person's body reads as sad.
yeah, so you can be in the wheelhouse, you can be in the general zone, and then the actor has some discretion on,
Exactly.
how they're gonna pattern it based on who they are,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then that becomes, like, your unique,
Fingerprint signature.
trademark, your signature, your
Yeah.
trademark is that this is your trademark look, you know,
Yeah.
that you what you can do with your eyes, what you can do with
Yeah.
just a turn of the head, and, like, the general movement of your hands, like, how you can convey things with your body, and
Yeah.
that's amazing that you it is a dance in a way that I hadn't thought of it in that way, but that's a cool way to think about it.
And then the book is broken up into these chapters that I think are facets of the artistic process, like time, space, relationship, meaning, things like that. And I think about somebody like you're talking about signature or fingerprint, and I'm thinking about Viola Davis,
Mhm.
the actress, and how she absolutely plays very different characters, brilliant actress, so she can morph beautifully into different qualities. But one thing that she always does is she plays with time in a
Mhm.
very meaningful way. Time is a vehicle for meaning for her, and she's got so much clarity. And either she might be, rushing through something and doing it at a really high speed, or she
We'll
might
slow
make
it
you
down.
wait. Yeah,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
make you wait for it. But either way, she uses a lot of control around time to create meaning. That's one of her signatures.
It's cool when people find, I guess they develop it over time through the craft, like everybody who's in art, they develop the thing that they're known for.
Yeah.
And, it takes, it's a lot of rigor.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to go from 0 to 100 in this age of everything happening all at once real quick.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like in the arts, it's like you do have to take the time, like Viola Davis said, you have to take the time to serve the craft. They
And to know yourself. Like I really believe that you cannot be a a transformational artist if you're avoiding yourself.
Mhm, that's a definite thing. I think that's like a well, I go back to looking glass self, and I always come up with is like this idea that you really kind of got to know yourself before you can know anybody else. And that's a common theme. It seems simple, but a lot of people will struggle with that through their life until they actually come to terms with it. But I want to thank you for being on the show. We always end up coming up at the time faster than
Yeah.
we anticipate, but I want to thank you again for being here. But one of the things we do have your URL. So if people click on URL, is that the way they can connect with you to find out
Yeah.
about everything you're doing?
Yep. Absolutely. I've got a lot of free resources and goodies and free classes on my website, so feel free to check it out. Yeah.
And that will be fully clickable, like Alexandra
Belly
Bellerdances.org.
dancers.
That's fully
Mhm.
clickable on
Yep.
all the channels we're on. And so I want to thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you.